Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Open to Life podcast. This is episode 12, and I am joined with my friend, Christian Allen. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for having me on the Open Life podcast. I'm really happy to be on here and for all the conversation we're going to have today.
Yes, so Allen, Christian, does that happen a lot?
You know, it's really interesting. A lot of times people will call me Alan because they think not that like Christian is like a nickname, but Christian is like, like brother Alan. They think like Christian Alan. You're not just any Alan, you're the Christian one.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself. Who even are you?
Yeah, well, so happy to be here in San Francisco this week, shooting a film with yourself and with your awesome, fantastic golden retriever of a husband as well, here in the Bay Area with the Iron Inquisitor. I come from a background of media, film and television, so doing different semi-scripted shows, working on feature films of various degrees, directing, producing, doing PR and publicity, which is mainly my study and my field of academic. And school, I went to UCLA, started my agency by B Studios, Believe You're the Best, there where we represent and help find the voice and the footing of various creators, actors, independent studios, and the like in this digital media space that we live in now. So.
Very cool. Like moi.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what this is.
Okay, so Christian, tell us, what first drew you to film and media production?
Yeah, well, what first drew me to film and media production, I think what's really interesting is people just assume that maybe I'd always grown up around it. No one in my family to this day is like in the media field. But also, my family and I like to say we grew up under a rock because we didn't really have cable. Families didn't have cable, right? So we didn't have cable. We didn't really watch a lot of like the classic films that you might see to be like quintessential, right? Like I'm talking like Mean Girls, Legally Blonde. The films that every kid has watched.
I can relate to that. I feel like as I got older, people were like, "You've never seen Legally Blonde," or things like that. I'm like,
yeah, exactly. Like I can get the reference. Like Elle Woods, that has made its way to me, but beyond that, you're losing me.
Yeah.
But I think the substitute was reading, and with reading and with consuming other mediums of art, it showed me the power that art can echo in our bones and in our soul. So it was really cool getting to fall in love with all these other fields of art, so that when I finally really did start getting exposed to film, which kind of came all at once for me, and I was like, wow, this is really powerful. I saw how even and not storytelling through film, it can have a great effect on us. So just imagine how much more of a great effect we can have when we combine visual and audio and these other senses that we do in film to tell a story.
Wow. Okay. So then how did your pro-life convictions influence that journey?
And you see the reaction I did there. So that's really interesting because this is, part of my new effort and initiative to start becoming more open, soft launch as we called it earlier,
Soft launch.
Being pro-life. And I would say that being pro-life, why it matters to anyone out there that is pro-life or pro-choice and listening to this is we have so many stories in this room that come from Hollywood, right? We have stories that show pursuing your dreams. We have stories that show self-love and putting yourself first. But what we do have is a vacancy of many more stories. Stories that show people choosing life in adversity. Stories that show why Latino families, time and time again, come in these big-sized families. Because life, no matter the circumstance, no matter the situation of that conception, is so worth and so beautiful to them. So I think me being a filmmaker and being someone that is pro-life is just me wanting to show something that is underrepresented, and wouldn't we all want to do that in this space of media?
Was there a moment that you decided you wanted to tell pro-life stories through media?
Yeah, it was when I decided that everything in my life was pointed in that direction. Maybe like many of you listening, I didn't grow up pro-life. A lot of people...
Scandal.
A lot of people in my circle, even to this day, would not call themselves pro-life. And so it was not easy to take on that identity, especially in a state like California.
Yeah.
So the truth of it is that no one calls himself pro-life because they want to. They call themselves pro-life because it's a conviction. And when I realized that everything in my family's story and our story of unplanned parenthood through my cousins and through the amazing women in my life that show me you can do both. You can pursue a career and pursue parenthood, especially unplanned, or you can defer and you can make the most of that as well. And your dreams can be shaken, but we're not so weak as human beings that the slightest change and deviation in our plans means that we're going to crumble as people. I think what women in my life who have been these unplanned mothers have shown me is that they're so strong that life can change. You know, a literal life can come into the world, shake up the plans that they had for themselves, and they'll still bounce back. Their value is not contingent on the dreams that they had, but they can really just transform the dreams that they had, child or not. And so that I think that's really beautiful. And to answer your question, I just knew that this was my family story. What stories could we tell first, if not our own family?
So then, as a Latino, how has your cultural background shaped your perspective on life issues and storytelling?
It's so important because growing up a little bit removed from the culture of being
That's
Mexican,
okay. That's okay.
being Mexican American, what I did have was knowing that family is so important, right? I said I didn't grow up pro-life, but even though I didn't call myself pro-life, there was a story of family sacrifice, of saying yes to an unplanned pregnancy, of giving and giving and giving of oneself and of family's self for the new life that needed love and needed support. I've seen it in my grandmother, who came to the United States as a illegal immigrant and was a single mother for most of her life.
Wow.
The mother to 5 stepchildren and 10 biological children, had done that all on her own and taken care of her grandchildren as well.
Wow.
And I think that shows how powerful love is and how powerful the compass of life is. That when we have life, we have that natural inclination to give everything. And I would say that, if nothing else, that is what represents Latino community at its finest, is life and sacrifice. Life is the most powerful thing we have in any community, but Latinos, they really get it. So.
Okay. So tell us about your most recent or most meaningful project. What message did you hope to share through it?
You know, my most recent, most meaningful project would have to be what brings me to town this weekend, which would be The Fallen, shout out the Iron Club. It's really cool because the further I get into this field of entertainment, the more selective I am about the projects that I join. And I like to sign on to the projects that already kind of personify what I'm thinking in my head. As a Catholic, I'm pretty frequently thinking about, you know, what does life look like after we die, right?
Yeah.
And as a Catholic as well, you can probably share that. We know that we're doomed for hell unless we really repent and unless we really say yes and devote everything to Jesus and to God. And so with the story, The Fallen, without giving too much away, it really is kind of putting it bluntly. Here's what's going to happen to you if you don't repent. And if you don't repent sincerely, right? Not just going to church, not just saying your prayers, and not just trying to put on a show for everyone else. You don't need to prove anything to anyone else. What you need to do is prove to God. So I think the Iron Inquisitor has written a very morbid story, a very sad story, but a true story. Just like it or not, we're all going to die. Happens is dependent on how we live this life.
So you play the best friend to the
I play the best friend.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm everyone's best friend off screen, I'm everyone's best friend on screen, so it's pretty cool.
And then I am also starring in this film, y'all. If it's released by the time this podcast will be released, I'm gonna tag the film down below, and I'm gonna play like a supporting role of like sorority girl.
Yeah, can you see, like, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, so very cool. What challenges do you face when trying to bring pro-life messages into a largely secular or skeptical media environment? Touch on that.
Want to know what the challenge I would say is? It is showing people that hold the same view that I do of being pro-life. Generally, we need to take the time and the effort to try to cross the aisle. Nothing that I'm a part of do I ever want to be propaganda.
What do you mean by cross the aisle?
What I mean by crossing the aisle is that my target audience aren't people that are pro-life. Sure, the same
people
views.
who already agree.
Yes, that you know, respect life and culture of life. I don't want to preach to the choir because I saw how I ascended into this way of seeing the world and seeing life, and I love the respect that I hold for life now. If I can feel that way, I have faith that many other people that don't yet can feel that way too. But that starts with understanding where they're coming from. I remember very vividly why I used to be pro-choice, and you don't need to affirm how other people perceive the world to empathize with how they see the world as well. And everyone wants to feel heard, and progress begins with dialogue, is what I've always believed. So I don't want to preach to the choir. I don't want to project and show one side to any story or any perspective. We can believe in Jesus and his objective truth, but also show that Jesus was patient and he gave us time. Wow. That's what I want to do. Oh my gosh. And my filmmaking and in my storytelling is show that these people that are pro-choice, I have faith that at the end of the day, most of us want to do what's right. What we share in common is that we want to honor women. And honor their right to have freedom and their right to follow their dreams and their right to be safe. And if we can start there, then we have a lot to work with. Yeah, all good points. I remember through apologetics trainings, one of the very first things that was honed in on is common ground. Like, don't spend all day talking about what we disagree on. Like, what do we all agree on? I know we both really care about women. We both want to see families thrive. We want people to be in healthy relationships. We want people to be safe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So totally, we definitely want to start with common ground. Yes. Because I think sometimes the perspective can be, and you know, your question is, what's the hardest thing? And I would say that's the hardest thing. Because crossing that line. Times, because sometimes people that are pro-life are like, you know, what are you doing? Like, you got to show them the truth. The hardest part is getting pro-life people to be willing to cross the aisle. Willing to cross the aisle and willing to follow me down the stories that I want to tell. To be like, we don't want to preach to the choir. Yeah, because the stories, you know, some of the products that I've done, An Unplanned Miracle, An Unplanned Melody, Milestone, Whole Thing, Son of Hope, are that they're not explicitly anti-abortion stories. It's kind of in the situation where there are some pro-life people that will show victim imagery, right, which has a time and place. And a lot of pro-life people can agree on that. There are some pro-life people that have an adversity to that, and while they won't show a abortion victim at 26 weeks, they might show, here's what a fetus looks like at 26 weeks. And that way people that are pro-life and pro-choice can get behind that imagery. And so I want to, it's more important to me that I earn your trust and you earn mine and you follow me down those stories. And so if respecting that needs to happen, then I will do that as well. Okay. So then how do you balance artistry and advocacy without compromising either? That's great. I think my parents really teed me up to have a head on my shoulders. Teed you up? Yeah, exactly. You did golf growing up. I did do golf. I did golf until age 12, but I competed competitively for about 7 years. Some lore on Christian. And so to answer your question, let's say I balance it by remembering the why, right? And in media, I really want to humanize and dignify. As a Catholic, I'm not just pro-life. I want to see all human life have good qualities of life, but also learn virtues such as discipline and patience, joy, right? And so I want to show those stories because I don't just want people to come to the conclusion, okay, life is worth living or life is valuable or sacred so long as we can guarantee it has a sufficient standard of life. But that's not the moral to take away. The moral to take away is that all life is valuable and life is bound and doomed to be imperfect because we live in the world that we live in. But we gotta find God and all the cracks and all those moments. And that's the takeaway, is that no material good is going to suffice us. What we got to do is come to that surrender. And so with remembering that's not why, I'm trying to put forward these virtues and trying to keep a narrow focus on God and Jesus. I try to hold myself accountable to that in activism and media. Okay.
In your opinion, what do you think is missing in how the pro-life movement uses media today? I'm curious to hear this answer, by the way.
Yeah, and this is like such an interesting question. And I'm curious to see what you think about it.
Okay.
What I would say is missing is trying to recognize people for the efforts that they are doing that might be building a culture of life in ways that we usually don't think of building it.
Okay, expand.
Like, I think a lot of people that are pro-choice or personally pro-life or whatnot feel that the identity of pro-life is held hostage from them because pro-life, maybe they have a small interest in supporting life or they respect life preborn just a little bit, but they respect other forms of life too. So when they see pro-life individuals having a little bit of a imbalance in who they value life of and who they don't, or projecting that respect, then they feel a little alienated, right? And so I would say there are incredible people doing incredible humanitarian work and using their platform in Hollywood to do that. One that comes to mind is Caitlin McHugh Stamos, the founder of Civic Soul. And Civic Soul does a lot. They work with a lot of resources and nonprofits that actually support Black and brown expecting mothers to be in finding healthcare and in finding resources, finding housing, finding scholarships.
Wow.
They support a lot of other funds for maybe displaced families of the Los Angeles fires that happened earlier this year.
Wow.
Caitlin McHugh Stamos is a practicing Catholic. She is the wife of John Stamos, actually, and she would not call herself pro-life in the ways that most people that are pro-life would. She is actually not against abortion, and that's where we disagree. But I think people that are pro-choice or not anti-abortion might have an easier time coming around or listening to us if they knew that we also credited what they're doing is very good. You might not be pro-life, you might not be anti-abortion, which is incredibly important to me. Because I think abortion is priority because it's killing a lot of lives, mass. But I can still recognize that what she is doing is just incredible. And more people that are pro-life should also be giving back in those ways. Because I think, what she does in supporting low-income families can build that culture of life where families that are expecting or soon to be expecting know that they're taken care of and they won't go under because there are organizations like Civic Soul that can be out for them.
So you think that the pro-life movement needs to do a better job of publicly praising the work of people who maybe wouldn't call themselves pro-life, or the work that they're doing is pro-life, like us as pro-life people affirming, yes, more of that, please.
I think, and that's what makes this really interesting. What I would say is the pro-life movement can do a better job when it comes to media of not creating the narrative that if you're pro-choice or if you're anti-abortion, you are, in all of your character, a bad person. Because no one wants to be perceived. Everyone is going to be repellent to that. Okay. So I think right now a lot of people that are not anti-abortion feel like then I'm against you and I want no part of you because you're going to look down on me and you think that you're morally superior to me. And that's not it. I wholeheartedly disagree with abortion, but can I say that a lot of people are doing a lot to support life, whether they are anti-abortion or not? Yeah, they're doing great deals to support life. I think they could support even more lives by being anti-abortion, but they are not less valuable than I am. And they do not have the less capacity in their heart to respect life as much as I aspire to. So.
That's such a good point. When I was navigating my own unexpected pregnancy with my son in a completely new city, in a new country, in a new state, I was navigating finding resources. And one of the resources I did find in San Francisco is called Homeless Prenatal Program. And they did a lot to help me through free clothes, free food, free diaper, support groups, internship. It was just a plethora of resources. And that was just the resources that I benefited from. They also had daycare and more resources that I don't even know. They would help people find housing placement, but they as an organization do not consider themselves pro-life. They would say that they are pro-choice. And I firmly believe that the work they're doing is good and I benefited from it,
Yes, and well, I guess my question is, are they new abortion, or are they like promoting abortion?
Well, I wouldn't know because I feel like by the time a girl gets to them, I would hope she is determined to parent.
Yeah.
And I don't think they would recommend abortion if a girl comes and she's looking for help. However, I do think if a girl comes and is saying something along the lines of, I'm just not sure if I want this baby, then I think that they would be willing to refer for abortion. Their whole premise is helping pregnant and parenting families, especially low income and people of color.
I guess you could say they do more to help Planned Parenthood. They do more to help women choose life.
Yeah.
By giving them support.
Like, they don't realize what they're doing is really, it seems like operating from a pro-life ethos without them recognizing it or being in favor of calling themselves pro-life.
Yeah, and I think that's what we can say, is that there are so many organizations out there, neutral or maybe implicitly like supporting abortion, that can work as intervention and be helping our cause. But that's also the thing, right? We don't just want, you're helping our cause, and you don't, it's not about like ourselves and our pride and look at how powerful our cause is, right?
Yeah.
And this is all in the engine of supporting life, intervening, and protecting as many lives as we can that have that are silent but have been brought into the world. So
my opinion on what could the pro-life movement be doing better in terms of media? Well, I feel like in so much of the national pro-life movement that there's almost like one cookie cutter pro-life person, that every pro-lifer is white Republican and conservative, whatever have you. And I feel like that is what is seen in mainstream media, I guess, the major voices of the movement. And I just wish there would be more elevating, what would you say, non-conforming, not the average cookie cutter pro-lifer voices, because I think that would also be beneficial to your point of reaching people across the aisle, because people may feel like, I'm vegan, I can't possibly be pro-life, even though I'm against the killing of kids in the womb. I can't be pro-life like all those white conservatives. But if people could see someone like them in media, to be like, oh, okay, so I can be vegan and pro-life. Like, oh, that's really cool. Or I can be alternative goth or whatever. I wish there would be more. And I don't know, it's a fine line to balance because people don't want to feel tokenized. I think that pro-life alternative people of color or whatever other backgrounds should also be in places of leadership, because then I think that's a way not to tokenize people if you also value their voices in the war room, and then have those people also be public facing figures in media.
Yeah, the reality is we do live in a world that can resort to reducing itself down to its external identity factors. And when I mean our race, our nationalities, our age, maybe our sexuality, or our interests that are on the surface, right? And so while we are much, much more to that, I think what we're kind of getting at is show me you're sincere. Co-opt someone else's story. Don't be from a place of showmanship where you're a white, maybe certain politically leaning person that is talking about abortion is bad because it does this to black women or this or that. And then know nothing about that community.
And then you never hear a black woman as the spokesperson.
Yes, so maybe
it happens, but very seldom.
So that we don't like go down that rabbit hole of, okay, well, like, where does it end? So can no one that because on the flip side, it's also, well, I don't need to be of that group that is being oppressed to know that it's wrong, right? Because abortion is wrong in any case, right? But I think what we do need to see are people telling their stories, right? And if abortion disproportionately affects this group and that group, well, then let's hear from that's been affected.
Yes.
Right? And let's also see how just like, well, tell me these stories, right? Instead of telling me how this is going to serve your cause, Because yes, anyone can speak out against abortion. Everyone should speak out against abortion.
Totally.
Right? But I believe abortion...
I want all the white conservatives to be boldly pro-life. No shame on the white conservatives.
Yeah, but I think so many people out there feel... Maybe people that would be pro-life, people that have been pro-life, would still be pro-life and would still be firmly across the board pro-life if there was a place made for them. Because in order to have true equality in this movement, where we don't need to make sure that we are checking off the boxes and including every kind of margin in it, we need to make sure that everyone is given the same chance of speaking up and sharing their story. There have to be more Latino pro-life people, more Black pro-life people. More than just you and me. More alternative pro-life people out there that want to share their stories. But there is an interesting trend that we hear a lot about it, but we don't see it. Yes. And it's not adding.
Yes, totally. Okay, so speaking about bridging the aisle, how can storytelling be used more effectively to reach hearts, not just minds, with the pro-life message?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. When we were at the Hawk Trail earlier today,
we saw a pretty sunset near the Golden Gate earlier today, for context.
And Jerry had made a joke about a show. What was that show? SpongeBob, right? And so we use our consumption of media to inform our sense of humor, but much more than that, our character, our style of clothing, our behavior all the time, right? Whether we like it or not, even trends, even reels, we'll always be calling back to all these things, verbally, externally, and internally. Media and art has always had a powerful effect on how we perceive the world and how we carry our own character out. And I think, if we live in this world that wants to give everyone equal opportunity and deciding who they want to be, if there are so many stories out there that frame abortion as a woman's right or a woman's choice or freedom or liberation, at the least, we can see stories that show how someone found dignity in their preborn child enough to not kill it before it was born and breathing. I think we can see these stories that present good reason as to why is abortion always going to happen? Yes, it will always happen. But should it? What does strength look like in someone that chooses life? And those stories of choosing life and saying yes to life need to be heard. This is a story of millions around the world and so many different continents. And so that's what I would say is media goes a long way. Because our character, how we see ourselves in people, looks downstream of what we consume.
Wow. Okay. So with storytelling that involves pain, complexity, or even sharing about a person who has experienced abortion, how do you approach telling difficult stories like that?
The more we can know about the subject matter of the story we're telling, the better a job we do at telling that. Right? So when I was at the crossroads, knowing that I was feeling so visceral about abortion for the first time in my life, I knew I wanted to tell something about unplanned parenthood, not condemning people for getting abortion, not saying you got to rethink what you think about abortion, but simply saying here is the unsugar-coated reality of what an unplanned pregnancy looks like and what the decision to say yes looks like. So it's not an easy decision. And then what unplanned parenthood looks like. But even so, I did my research on people that were post-abortive, that regretted their decision, that agreed with their decision, people that were teen or young parents that had chosen life, and really try to put myself in those shoes. Because I'm not a parent. I was never a teen parent. I have never had a child on my own, right? But the more I can really do my diligence and knowing someone's story and try and put myself in those shoes, well, if I do it, maybe the audience can do it as well. And so I think that's where it starts. Putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And
that's so good because it's almost like you should tread lightly, delicately, and that's good that you do your homework. Okay, so switching gears. I is why is Latino representation in the pro-life movement, and especially in pro-life media, so important? And we could even speak broader than that, of like people of color.
My first answer is like, do you know how many people in Latin America are pro-life? I would say like so much of Latin America, whether abortion is legal in some countries like Mexico or not, it's like pro-life story right there. And it's not just, I want to get to a point, once abortion is banned, and we do have that culture of life here in the West, where it's not, this is pro-life, and this is what pro-life looks like. And no, this is what pro-family, this is what life looks like.
Yes,
And
right?
this is what the culture of life looks like.
I so look forward to that one day, that pro-life is the norm, pro-life is the default, abortion is never even on people's minds. If an unexpected pregnancy happens, the knee-jerk response is, congrats, let's get you to the nearest pregnancy help center. Like that abortion is just gone. Yeah. It's not even a thought.
Yeah, but also a world where people are, yes, they're against abortion and they're against violence toward other human beings, but also they see family and life as such a gift. And they see sacrifice and discipline as great opportunities to grow in character as well, becoming more virtuous.
Yeah.
So I guess I wouldn't want to see just a pro-life world. I'd want to see like a very Catholic world, is what I'm describing.
Please.
Yeah, so I think, like, if everything else crumbles on the pro-life movement, the people that will always be pro-life are Latinos. So we really need to be leading the charge. We have led the charge. We've kept the church alive here in a state like California, and we know what it's like to secondhand, firsthand have unplanned pregnancy affect and shake our core. I've been affected by unplanned pregnancy, and I've never been a parent, right? And so really just telling those stories, because more powerful than someone telling a story about someone else on choosing life is us telling our own stories and someone telling it for us. So I think that's important.
Okay. How do you see Latino communities responding to pro-life messaging? And how could media better connect with them?
I mean, you might agree with this. The further we get from our roots, the harder it is to register that where we come from is a very pro-life story, right? So a lot of Latinos that are a few generations removed and my age maybe would call themselves pro-life, or maybe have been told that the party that is pro-life is against their well-being in other ways. So they've been alienated. I cannot support this party because this party is not actually as pro-life as they like to call themselves. And so I think that's the importance of, older generations are maybe more anti-abortion. They haven't been exposed to it. And that's the power of banning abortion, especially in countries in Latin America where it's already illegal. If people were never exposed to it, it's never legal, right? Don't ever think about it. And so it's not that they will feel they're robbed of a right, but they won't feel the absence of a right because it was never a right. But here in the States, where we have so many people that are few generations removed, maybe they feel betrayed, or you don't have that trust, right? That if you're pro-life, you have my best interest in heart, because I see how you're active. From their perspective, I see how you're actively working against my rights in other ways. So for you, it's not about bringing and protecting as many lives, it's about control and dictating how other people live their life, is what I would say. People that are not pro-life, but maybe are young Latino growing into themselves.
What advice would you give to young creatives who want to use their gifts for life-affirming work?
And the advice that I would give them is do it. We all have a gift. If the past years have taught me anything, it's that God is very powerful, and when there's a will, there is a way, and the time is now, right? At the very least, what you can do may save a few lives, may deter someone, may be intervention. There are so many unrealized ways that we can really work more to not only intervene in the lives of women that are abortion ideated, but really transform their lives and set them on a much better path. So there's so much that can be done. Work that, like, I'm doing with Students for Life, doing California Diaper Drives Days, and I'm doing different item collections to make sure that these resources that are out there always stay supplied so that they can help the most parents in need and really create a good reputation of doing that in their community. But then also, I believe that God qualifies the called. And so things will work out, and you won't know unless you give it your best shot. And so that's what I would say. is life is not really easy. Maybe you might agree with me. Life is hard, right? It's hard pursuing your creative passion. It's hard pursuing your passion for activism or improving the world, right? But life is also hard if you don't. Like you feel like maybe you ran away or you missed out on what your calling was or what your passion was. So life is hard if you follow your calling, and life is hard if you don't. So you got to pick your heart, and I'd rather try to make it work for as long as one can. Okay, Christian. So, if resources and time were unlimited, what would be your dream project? That's so cool. I would really like to make a scripted feature film. So a feature film is like a narrative. Of course. But really showing like these resources in action. Like how a character that's maybe a little bit more resistant to these resources needs to see them for all the good and maybe some of the negligence or ways they have to go in better helping the community. But really how a community is able to step in and support them. Not so that it can serve our pro-life cause, just because I want as many people to get the help that they need out there. It's never really about how can I help the movement, it's how can I help people. We have to remember that we're doing this to support life, not to fill our own kind of moral pockets of, oh, now people are pro-life, right? It's not about us. And so that's what I would like to see, is just a story that shows how far help can really go. I really love your perspective on like, I'm not trying to preach to the choir. I'm not trying to reach the people who already agree with me. I'm trying to reach the people who maybe are close to changing their mind or maybe way off, but their hearts could be softened, or maybe even reach the person who would consider choosing life by seeing whatever you would create. That's such a cool perspective. I really like that. So, how can our listeners support your work or get involved with what you're doing? Yeah, well, I'm really excited too. For so long, I'd waited for other creators to get out there. And so with everything I do, I want to find more and more creatives like yourself and other people that have these big, ambitious, medial dreams to put forward that culture of life in the world. And I like to call it assembling the Avengers. Really, it's about me finding you and being able to work with you. And so there's so many more projects I want to do, so many more projects I want to help tell, steer in the right direction, and always help those projects keep their integrity. And you all have them, we all have them. So I told my story and I want to help other people tell theirs. And so you can find me on socials at It's Christian Allen. So It's Christian Allen, ALAN. You can also check out AUM series on Instagram. Click the link in bio to find all the places where you can stream that project and see how you would like to use that as a framework to tell your own. And I will tag those links in the caption. Okay, Christian. So this is the Open to Life podcast. And a question I like to ask my guests is, what is some advice you can give to a girl or a couple to encourage them to be open to life? Yeah, the advice that I would give to, and those are very different situations, right? A couple and a young girl. Yeah, like a girl who finds herself in an unexpected pregnancy and a couple who is contracepting. How can we encourage people to be open to life? Yeah, what I would say is that you have more strength than you think, right? And part of me wanting your well-being is believing in your strength. In my experience, sometimes what women that have an unplanned, unwanted pregnancy at some point need to hear is not that your child is a human, but that you're a human and you will be loved no matter what you've done. Because maybe the lack of love is what led you into this situation. So starting now, is where the love begins. And you can do this. And there's so many different love languages, right? What I would say my love language is, and the love language of these resources is, I can show you what love looks like. I'll just tell you. And so that's what I would say to that girl. But also what I would say to that couple is that life is so precious. Child's life, or the life that they could conceive, the contracepting, so is yours. And wouldn't you want to continue that life? You know, we're all going to die someday. And the ways that we can live on is through our generations. How powerful is that? That we're all really connected because we can all pass on our customs, our experiences, heritage, right? To those we conceive and parent in this world, or those that we parent, by the selflessness of taking them on, they weren't conceived on our own, right? And so I think that's really precious. And you're as human as the child that you're conceiving, and you can do this. Yeah. You can overcome the hardship of being a parent, and maybe you can attest to that, right? Yeah. There's a lot of hardship though. It's hard if you do become a parent. And it's hard if you don't. The weight of that, once you know that there's a human being that could be occupying space in this world, but it's not because of a violent procedure. And so life is hard. But the great thing is that even when it's hard, even when there's sacrifice or when there's discipline, a lot of discipline from what I hear to come with parenting, right? That can really grow us. And even in those hard moments, God has a plan and God is making use of that. So how beautiful is it that we're always taken care of by something far bigger than ourselves, but also at least what I can help and hope other people do is they are also trying to take care of you. Wow, you speak so profoundly. I really love the way you speak. Thank you. Thank you. Well, Christian, it has been a pleasure having you on the Open to Life podcast. Thank you so much for our conversation. Thank you for having me. And I'll see you in the next episode. Open to Life podcast over and out.